Okay. So I was saying that we propose to use autobiographical memory retrieval to study indirectly mind wandering. So autobiographical memory, it's the memory which allows you to remember personal past event. So for example, you can remember precisely your, it does not work anymore. Sorry. You can remember precisely how you celebrated your last birthday party. Thank you.
So?
Yes. So that's it. And we think that this kind of cognitive processes is somehow similar to mind wandering, because for some author, mind wandering is considered as a part of this episodic memory system, and both are overlapping. For example, 60% of the time we spent mind wandering is dedicated to autobiographical thought. So 60% of the time you zone out, you mostly think about personal past event. Even more than that, they both share the same neural substrate with the default mode network. Mind wandering is also involved in memory replay. So we use mind wandering to replay our memories and consolidate them. Memory retrieval can also be spontaneous. They both require mental time travel and an attentional switch away from the environment. So for this reason, we consider it's a good model. And it is a very interesting cognitive processes, because a lot of studies have shown that mind wandering is associated with eye movement. So potentially eye movement could be a marker of this attentional switch, but all this eye movement does not really allow real-time detection of this switch, because they are based on a posteriori average, for example, the number of blinks, the duration, and so on. But episodic memory and autobiographical memory has been linked to gaze aversion, which is one eye movement, which could maybe be a temporal marker of this attentional switch. So it could really occur when the switch appears. So gaze aversion, you know what it is. It's a very familiar behavior. So here we ask this woman to remember the day she passed her driving license. And if you observe her eyes, you can see that after some time, she will look at the ceiling or in the sky as if the answer was there. So it's very common. If you ask family or friends such question, you will most likely observe it. So here we are very interested in that behavior. So for that, we designed a protocol where we have an autobiographical memory retrieval condition and a visual task as a control task, which does not require internal attention. And we'll record eye movement with electrooculography, so a method which allows to measure the ocular potential thanks to electrodes which are placed around the eyes. So here we can see that there are 2 electrodes to measure vertical eye movement and 2 electrodes for horizontal eye movement. And we chose that method because in aeronautic, we think they are good perspective. There is, for example, this project Eloquence at ISAE-SUPAERO, where they show that instead of recording around the eyes, we could maybe record the same signal, or at least the component of this signal around the ears, and it could be included directly in the helmet in the cockpit in this situation, for example. So now we'll detail our task a bit more. So in autobiographical memory retrieval trial, it starts with a fixation cross. The participant fixates the screen, then we are sure he looks at the middle. Then he will hear an autobiographical memory question. For example, can you remember your last birthday party? And before answering, he will realize a short visual task where he will see a series of letters, and he will say for each of them if there is a curved line in it or not. It's just to keep the focus toward the word before he starts thinking mentally about his memory. So the switch appears at this moment. And then we have a debriefing where he tells us loudly his memory to be sure he did the task properly. We have a control condition with the visual task where there is still this fixation cross. Then instead of hearing a question, he will hear a message saying that he will need to find the number 5, which is hidden in an image. Same task with the letter, and then the switch toward this visual task. So here the goal was to find the number 5. And in this case, it was there in the palm of the guy on the left. And then same thing, we have a debriefing and the participant will tell us where the 5 was. Then we are sure he did the task. So during the task, we have the EOG signal. So we subtract the 2 horizontal electrodes to get the horizontal movement, and same processes for the vertical movement. So we can see the eye movement in the EOG signal, but here we were interested in which kind of eye movement, because the most common one is the visual saccades, which have been largely studied. So these are the saccades we do all the time to go from one fixation point to another when we see our environment. So the goal is to see, but in the case of gaze aversion, we think this is a different eye movement, so we should have a different signal. And the goal of gaze aversion is to bring the gaze away from visual distractor. So the goal would be to not see for the perceptual decoupling. So here we expect to see visual saccade during the visual task and gaze aversion in some trials of the memory retrieval task. So we have 2 students who labeled all the eye movement manually, because there is currently no good algorithm which detects eye saccades in the signal in free viewing signal, so very noisy signal. Gaze aversion were labeled with the synchronized video as a ground truth, and the inter-rater concordance was high, so people are able to detect when there is gaze aversion or not. So now we have 2 groups of eye movement. On one side, the visual saccade, on the other side, the gaze aversion, and we are able to compare their EOG signal to see if there is statistics difference in eye angle and velocity of the signal. So we expected gaze aversion to be faster and to also be larger, because we bring the eyes very far compared to a normal visual saccade where the heads tend to follow and so on. And then we were interested to know if gaze aversion has a specific EOG signature, and we look at the epoch and evoked related potential. So before showing the result, I will show you an example of the signal. So on the left, you have examples of visual saccades. On the right, an example of a gaze aversion. So we can see the amplitude already looks different, and the pattern also, because the gaze aversion is mostly visible on the vertical signal. So that was the first observation we made. Then we looked at the result, first for the gaze angle. So you have the visual saccades on the left and the gaze aversion on the right. Green is the horizontal signal and red is the vertical one. And we can see that, as expected, eye angle has a larger amplitude during gaze aversion compared to visual saccade. Similar results for the velocity of the signal, which was much higher during gaze aversion only for the vertical signal. So here we conclude that gaze aversion has a higher amplitude and higher velocity during gaze aversion than visual saccade for the vertical EOG. So that was our first result. And to check if the pattern of gaze aversion is always similar or not, we looked at the ERP of 3 participants. The 4th one was excluded because he did not do enough gaze aversion to do such analysis. So on top, it's the horizontal signal, on the bottom, the vertical one. And we can see that there is still much more activity on the vertical signal during gaze aversion compared to the horizontal signal, which is surprising because during normal saccades, the EOG signal, the horizontal one, generally shows bigger amplitude. And if we look at every participant individually, we can see that the pattern of gaze aversion looks similar. So participants tend to do always their gaze aversion in a similar way. So if I want to conclude, these are very preliminary results, but these are encouraging because we can see that in EOG, on the vertical signal, we can see differences during visual saccades compared to gaze aversion. So it provides perspective because we could maybe use our algorithm to detect the 2 kinds of movement automatically in real time to detect this attentional switch. But there are still limitations, obviously, and one of them is the inter-individual variability. So maybe we would need a personal calibration. But we want to pursue studies about this topic because we think it's really important in aeronautics. So the next study will evaluate the impact of this attentional switch in a task which looks like the air traffic controller task, and we'll check if it alters the performance as well. and if gaze aversion appears as well in that context. And then we'll try to induce memories more spontaneously than just asking questions to get closer and closer from what mind wandering really is and the way it generally appears in daily life. Yeah, I think I'm done. I just want to thank you for your attention and thank people who work with me on that project. So there are Raphaël and Hanna who labeled the signal, and Emmanuel and Christophe who are my thesis supervisor.